Okay, so we are going to discuss different careers in psychology. Keep in mind that psychologists are not merely therapists completely. I just want to make the point before we go into the lecture here that there are many avenues to pursue in psychology and not just private practice, as a lot of people have a misconception. Let me also say that if you are interested in becoming a psych major or pursuing psychology, just know going in that you will be in it for the long haul in terms of your education. So most of these jobs we're going to talk about do require at least a master's, if not doctorate degree, to be able to practice the different areas. So kind of keep that in mind. All right, so there are many different careers to pursue with a psych degree and many different areas of specialization. The first one is called a clinical psychologist. To put these guys in a nutshell, they specialize in understanding and helping people with psychological problems. For example, they may work with alcoholics or individuals with eating disorders. So in other words, they just specialize in understanding and helping people. Our next career, a psychiatrist, is one of the highest paying positions in psychology, and that is because they have advanced training. Psychiatrists also have a degree in medicine, so the program itself entails a lot of medicine influences, and so psychiatrists traditionally are the ones who prescribe medication to clients such as Prozac, Adderall, etc. And depending on what state you live in, usually it's psychiatrists that are the ones that can do this. Some states are slowly letting people with master's degrees do this with training, but ultimately they are the ones that prescribe drugs to treat psychological issues. Our next one is a psychoanalyst, also known as a Freudian type psychologist, a bit of dying breed here. These particular psychologists follow the teachings of Freud. So they are famous for tapping into the unconscious mind, analyzing someone's dreams, for example. In other words, they are devoted to Freud's therapeutic perspective, but unfortunately they have sort of died out. At one time they did dominate, but because of the long training involved and because a lot of the research is going in different directions, psychoanalysts are a dying breed. Next we go to the clinical social worker. So we're going to see some parallels here to the clinical psychologist, but to me the major difference with these folks is that they are trained to work with families of those who are having problems, and it's more of a social position. So in other words, rather than focusing specifically on the client, they may help the family members cope with someone who has depression or some other type of problem. Next we have the counseling psychologist. There are many varieties in this particular group. For example, a school counselor, an educational counselor, a marriage counselor. So typically they specialize in particular areas and they provide counseling, consultation advice to people who are seeking help in those areas. Next we go to kind of an exciting one, and that is the forensic psychologist. The forensic psychologists are the ones who provide consultation to the police, lawyers, the court systems, and parts of the criminal justice system. So they have the sort of a lure of working in those particular areas. For example, the psychologist may be called in to see if someone is mentally competent to stand trial, or to test if the defendant is faking by saying they have a mental disorder and they were insane when they committed this crime. That's the kind of areas they would be called in and specialize in. So it is kind of an exciting area of psychology and has a lot of appeal to people. Our next one is known as industrial psychologist, sometimes called organizational psychology. And this particular psychologist provides services to organizations or institutions. Typically, it would be some type of corporation or company who hires a resident psychologist to work specifically with their employees. So this would include things like employee testing, making sure they're right for the job, finding ways to help employees become more productive, those sort of issues, matching the right people for the right job. So they work specifically within that corporation. So it's kind of an interesting area. Next we go to ergonomics. To put this one bluntly, it's the study of humans, machines, and psychology. So it's kind of a combination of engineering, possibly computer work, and of course psychology. And just to give an example of what these folks would do, they may be called in to design a machine to make it user-friendly. For example, to make this new device compatible with human utilization to the point where it's efficient, so people aren't getting upset over it and throwing it out their window, for example. In other words, they're concentrating on making things user-friendly based on their knowledge of humans. So I love this one because it's sort of a mashup of different areas of psychology rolled into one. Next we have the school psychologist, which is not a school counselor. That would fall more under our counseling positions here. A school psychologist is the one that is hired by a school district to test students for learning disabilities. So they may be involved in qualifying children for gifted programs or special ed, for example. They may be called in times of crisis if the school is dealing with something traumatic that happened, for example. So a lot of this particular position, which is well paid, by the way, is testing students in figuring out why they're learning or why they're not learning, that kind of thing, and then addressing their individual needs for education. All right, and then lastly are the military psychologists, which is pretty self-explanatory. They're going to provide services to the military, for example, testing and training people for the job, military jobs. They may consult leaders on how to deal with other cultures from a military standpoint. They may help soldiers deal with stress of combat. For example, a lot of our soldiers come back from combat with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So reaching that particular population and helping them to adjust and cope with their issues. So in wrapping up, you can see there's many different areas to sort of pursue. And once again, the common thread here that's going to weave all these together is lots and lots of training. So typically master's degree, if not a doctorate. Okay, so this wraps up the section in careers in psychology.